High in the mountains of Puebla rises the Cathedral of San Miguel, built in 1687 with the gold of the Villacruz family. For more than 300 years it has been admired as an architectural jewel, but few know that beneath its grand altar lie the most macabre foundations in all of Mexico. In 2018, workers restoring the temple uncovered something so disturbing that the Vatican immediately sent investigators. They found sealed chambers, human bones arranged in ritual patterns, and Latin engravings that spoke of blessed blood for the house of God. The Villacruz family had not only financed this cathedral, they had fed it with sacrifices for decades. Today, we will uncover why this story was hidden by the church for more than 3 centuries. In 1685, San Miguel de los Remedios was little more than a mountain village in the state of Puebla, Mexico. Adobe houses sprawled like beige stains along the green hillsides, and the ringing of morning bells marked the rhythm of a simple, devout life. The inhabitants, mostly indigenous people converted to Christianity, along with a few Creole merchants, lived off agriculture and the small silver mines scattered across the region. But one family stood above all others, the Villacruz. Don Hernando Villacruz, patriarch of the dynasty, had arrived from Spain 30 years earlier with nothing but a pouch of coins and a fierce ambition. Through strategic marriages, commercial partnerships, and an exceptional instinct for business, he built an empire stretching from the silver mines of Zacatecas to the ports of Veracruz. His wife, Dona Esperanza Villacruz, was known for her beauty and her extreme devotion. She spent hours on her knees in the village chapel, her lips moving in constant prayer while her fingers caressed a rosary of black pearls she never removed. Locals considered her a living saint, especially after she mysteriously healed 3 sick children simply by laying her hands upon them. Their children, Rodrigo and young Esperanza, had inherited both the father's shrewdness for commerce and the mother's seemingly unbreakable devotion. Rodrigo, at just 25, ruled over the mines with an iron hand, while Esperanza, barely 18, had already expressed her desire to take holy vows and dedicate her life to God. The family lived in an imposing hacienda built atop a hill, overlooking the entire valley. Its volcanic stone walls and towers crowned with wrought iron crosses made it seem more fortress than residence. Peons whispered that strange lights could be seen moving through the basement windows at night, but no one dared to ask what the family was doing in the darkest hours. The year was 1687. On the morning of March 15th, San Miguel de los Remedios awoke to a gray, chilly dawn. A thick fog descended from the mountains, wrapping the village in a shroud that seemed to swallow all sound. It was the day the construction of the Cathedral of San Miguel would officially begin, and the entire community gathered at the chosen site to witness the laying of the first stone. Don Hernando Villacruz appeared dressed in his finest attire, a black velvet suit embroidered with silver thread, a cloak that rippled dramatically with every step, and on his chest a solid gold cross that had belonged to his grandfather. His normally stern face carried a smile that never quite reached his dark eyes. At his side walked Dona Esperanza, her pale features partially hidden beneath a lace veil. Her lips moved in silent prayer, but her rigid posture betrayed a strange tension. Her hands, clasped tightly over her chest, trembled slightly despite the morning sun beginning to burn away the fog. Father Miguel Castaneda, the village priest, solemnly blessed the first stone while the workers, men hardened by years of mining, used to darkness and stone, stood ready with their tools in hand. Yet that day, something in the air made them uneasy. "Lord," proclaimed Father Castaneda with a resonant voice, "bless this stone, and upon it let there rise a temple worthy of your eternal glory. May these walls shelter the faithful, and may this altar bear witness to miracles and devotion." Then Don Hernando stepped forward. In a gesture that stunned everyone, he drew a ceremonial knife hidden in his cloak and sliced open his own palm. Blood flowed freely, dripping onto the limestone block, which seemed to absorb the crimson liquid as though it were thirsty. "With my blood, I consecrate this work," Don Hernando murmured, his words caught only by those closest to him. "May my sacrifice ensure the eternity of this sacred temple." The crowd exchanged uneasy glances. Extreme displays of devotion weren't unheard of, but there was something in Don Hernando's fevered eyes, something in the almost ritual way he let his blood fall, that made their skin crawl. But what truly unsettled them came moments later. When the workers began digging the foundation, the earth seemed to shift on its own. Their picks struck the soil with unnatural ease, as if the rocky ground had suddenly turned soft. And at barely 2 meters deep, one miner let out a scream of terror. "Senor Villacruz," shouted Pedro Morales, a seasoned miner whose face had drained of all color. "There's something here." Everyone rushed to the pit's edge. At the bottom, half buried in loosened earth, lay pale shapes, bones. But not animal bones. They were unmistakably human remains. A skull grinning macabrely up at the gray sky, rib bones forming perfect arcs, and long bones arranged in patterns far too deliberate to be natural. To the astonishment of all, Don Hernando descended into the hole with surprising agility for his age. He knelt by the remains, examining them not with horror, but with satisfaction. His fingers caressed the skull with a familiarity that made onlookers instinctively recoil. "This is a sign," he declared, lifting his gaze to the crowd. "God shows us that this place has already been consecrated through sacrifice. We will continue. These bones shall remain here, part of the sacred foundation." Father Castañeda shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't dare contradict the man financing the most ambitious project the village had ever seen. "If you believe it is God's will, Don Hernando," he muttered uncertainly, "though perhaps we should consult the bishop." "That will not be necessary," Don Hernando interrupted firmly. "God speaks through signs, and this sign is clear. The construction will continue as planned." That very night, several workers abandoned the project. They told their families they had seen something in Don Hernando's eyes, something not human, that had terrified them. And Pedro Morales, the miner who made the discovery, vanished without a trace before dawn. His wife searched for days, but neither his body nor any explanation was ever found. Only his favorite tool, a pickaxe with a carved wooden handle, remained, lying exactly where the bones had been unearthed. From that moment on, the construction of the cathedral took on a frantic, but also sinister, pace. For the next 18 months, the construction of the Cathedral of San Miguel advanced at a pace that defied all logic. The twin towers rose into the sky like accusing fingers. The great naves took shape with a perfection that seemed almost divine. The walls filled with detailed carvings, so detailed that local artists swore the figures shifted when no one was watching. But this miraculous speed came at a price, paid in blood and terror. Each month, at least one worker disappeared. Always the most skilled, the most talented, the ones whose hands seemed blessed with a special gift for building. Pedro Morales had been the first. Then came the master mason Joaquin Herrera, the stone carver Antonio Vasquez, and the young apprentice Carlos Mendoza, guilty only of showing a remarkable gift for gold work. Their families searched desperately, but it was as though the earth had swallowed them whole. No bodies, no traces, no explanations, only the heavy silence of the mountains and the feverish look in Don Hernando's eyes as he supervised the works. The remaining workers whispered among themselves. They spoke of strange lights flickering in the Villacruz hacienda on nights of the new moon, of chants in Latin drifting down with the fog from the mountain, of the way Dona Esperanza would watch them as she passed the site, as if she were inspecting livestock before the slaughterhouse. Even Father Castañeda had begun showing signs of unease. His sermons, once full of hope and joy for the magnificent cathedral rising in his parish, had grown dark. He spoke constantly of the price of sin, of the need for purification, and of how sometimes God demanded sacrifices no mortal could understand. "There are things," he whispered one night to the sacristan, "things happening in this construction that are not natural. Don Hernando calls it divine will, but I feel something darker moving among these stones." The sacristan, an old man named Tomas who had served the church for 30 years, nodded gravely. "The bones, Father," he murmured. "Every time they dig deeper, they find more bones. And they're not ancient. Some still have flesh clinging to them." Meanwhile, the Villacruz family seemed to prosper in ways that bordered on the supernatural. Their mines yielded more silver than ever before. Their businesses expanded across the region. Their influence grew so great that even colonial authorities treated them with fearful respect. Rodrigo Villacruz took a more prominent role in supervising the construction. His presence became constant at the site, and the workers noticed how his gaze had turned as cold and penetrating as his father's. He always carried a black leather notebook in which he scribbled constantly, but never allowed anyone to see what he wrote. Esperanza, the young daughter, had also changed. Her once radiant, angelic beauty had acquired something unsettling. Her skin was unnaturally pale, her eyes too bright, and her smile hinted at terrible secrets. She no longer spoke of taking holy vows. Instead, she spent hours locked in a basement room of the hacienda. From inside sometimes came muffled screams, sounds the servants nervously explained away as intense prayers. The servants themselves began to vanish as well. First Maria, the cook who had served the family for 10 years. Then Diego, the stable boy who knew all the horses' secrets. Later, Catalina, Dona Esperanza's personal maid, who confided to her sister that she had seen things in the cellar not of this world. When the families of the missing came to the hacienda seeking answers, Don Hernando greeted them with a polite smile and an explanation, always different, always convincing. Maria had returned unexpectedly to her native village. Diego had found work on a grander estate in Guadalajara. Catalina had eloped with a secret lover. The stories were plausible, but the way Don Hernando delivered them, never blinking, always smiling, left visitors with a deep, unshakable terror. And then came the smell. By the summer of 1688, a sweet, nauseating stench began seeping from the cathedral under construction, strongest near the foundations where the bones had first been uncovered. Workers said it smelled like wilted flowers mixed with something much darker, something that twisted their stomachs and filled their dreams with nightmares. When some suggested investigating the source, Don Hernando was adamant. "It is the odor of sanctity," he declared. "The stones themselves are being blessed by the divine presence. Only the pure of heart can recognize it for what it truly is, the perfume of paradise." But at night, when the wind blew from the cathedral toward the village, mothers shut their windows tight and whispered prayers to protect their children from whatever was growing in the shadows of that supposedly sacred temple. The truth was this: something had awakened in San Miguel de los Remedios. Something that had slept beneath the earth for centuries, waiting for the precise moment to rise. And the Villacruz family not only knew it, they had been carefully feeding it. Sacrifice after sacrifice, preparing it for a purpose still hidden in the shadows. On October 13th, 1688, the feast of Our Lady of the Pillar, an unexpected visitor arrived in San Miguel de los Remedios. His presence would forever change the course of this macabre story. Brother Alessandro Benedetti, a papal investigator sent from Rome to document miracles reported in the churches of New Spain, appeared on horseback along the mountain trail, a spectral figure emerging through the dawn fog. Benedetti was a thin, pale man in his 40s, with piercing gray eyes that seemed capable of seeing directly into a person's soul. His reputation preceded him. He had investigated cases of demonic possession in Milan, documented miraculous apparitions in Salamanca, and exposed several false miracles that had deceived entire communities for years. Don Hernando welcomed the papal investigator with all the honors due to his rank, but those who knew him well noticed an unusual tension in his normally controlled manners. His hands trembled slightly as he offered Benedetti wine, and his smile looked more like a forced grimace than genuine hospitality. "I have come," Benedetti explained during the welcoming dinner, "because extraordinary reports have reached Rome about this cathedral you are building. They say the works advance with miraculous speed, that the stones seem to move into place by divine will, and that the site is blessed with supernatural signs." At the far end of the table, Dona Esperanza dropped her wine glass. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain, and for a moment, silence filled the hall. "Forgive me," she murmured, her voice strained. What kind of signs?" The papal investigator fixed her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to read secrets written in forgotten tongues. "Lights moving without visible source. Angelic chants heard in the night. Testimonies from workers who claim to have seen holy figures materializing to bless the works. Phenomena which, if authentic, could make this cathedral a center of pilgrimage for the entire world." Rodrigo Villacruz leaned forward with what seemed like genuine interest, but his stiff posture betrayed his nerves. "And how do you verify the authenticity of such phenomena, brother?" "Through meticulous observation," Benedetti replied, cutting a piece of meat with precise movements. "Exhaustive documentation, detailed interrogation of witnesses, and, of course, physical examination of any material evidence." He paused significantly, then added, "I also have a certain sensitivity for detecting presences that are not of divine origin." The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery against porcelain and the wind moaning through the hacienda's towers. The next morning, Brother Benedetti began his investigation. He inspected every corner of the unfinished cathedral, noting details in a leather notebook he carried everywhere. He questioned workers, Father Castaneda, and villagers who claimed to have witnessed the supernatural events. But when he reached the foundations, his investigation took a dramatic turn. "This is unusual," he murmured, kneeling beside one of the massive stones. Dark stains were still visible, as though the rock had absorbed something unnatural. He scraped a sample into a glass vial. "Do you know what this substance is, Don Hernando?" "Surely just mud mixed with rain from recent storms," Don Hernando replied too quickly, his voice betraying a nervousness he hadn't shown before. Benedetti didn't look convinced. He continued his examination and arrived at the area where the first bones had been discovered. His expression changed entirely. He rose slowly, and when he spoke to Don Hernando, his voice carried an icy authority. "These bones," he said, pointing to remains still visible between the foundation stones, "are not ancient, as you claimed. Some bear marks suggesting violent death. And there is something else." He pulled a magnifying glass from his bag and handed it to Don Hernando. "Look closely at the engravings on this femur." Don Hernando's hands shook as he took the lens. The moment he focused on the bone, his face turned cadaverously pale. Carved into the surface, barely visible but unmistakable, were symbols belonging to no known Christian tradition. "Can you explain these engravings, Don Hernando?" Benedetti asked softly, dangerously, and it was then that Hernando made the mistake that sealed his family's fate. Instead of feigning ignorance, his nerves betrayed him. They are consecration marks," he blurted out, "to ensure the soul of the sacrificed remains bound to the holy place." The silence that followed was deafening. "Sacrificed," Benedetti repeated slowly, his gray eyes burning with terrible understanding. "You use that word in its literal sense." Don Hernando realized too late what he had revealed. His face twisted, and for the first time in years, it reflected his true nature. A mask of guilt and terror that made him look less like a man than a demon. "I did not mean it was only an expression," But Benedetti had seen enough. He had faced evil before, in many forms, and recognized its signs unmistakably. Without another word, he closed his notebook and walked toward the cathedral's exit. "Where are you going, brother?" Hernando cried after him, desperation cracking his voice. Benedetti stopped at the threshold, turned slowly, and spoke with the authority of centuries of church tradition and the weight of divine justice. "I will write my report," he said calmly, "and then I will pray for the souls of all those whose bones lie beneath this cursed cathedral." That night, while Brother Benedetti wrote feverishly in his room at the village inn, documenting every horrific discovery, the Villacruz family gathered in the basement of their hacienda. Their darkest secret was on the verge of exposure, and the consequences of decades of ritual killings were finally about to catch up with them in the most terrible way imaginable. The dawn of October 14th brought with it a fog so dense it seemed solid, suffocating every sound around the Villacruz hacienda. In the mansion's cellar, lit by black candles that gave off an oily, nauseating smoke, the family gathered around a stone table, one that had served purposes no Christian should ever know. Don Hernando paced like a caged animal, his usual composure shattered. The wrinkles on his face looked deeper in the flickering light, and his eyes gleamed with a desperate fury that made his distinguished features appear savage. "That cursed investigator knows," he growled, slamming his fist against the table. "I saw it in his eyes. He knows exactly what we've been doing here." Dona Esperanza sat unervingly calm, fingers caressing her black pearl rosary. But under the candlelight it became clear. Those pearls bore tiny engravings, each pulsing with a faint red glow, like tiny beating hearts. "Then we must act before he can send his report to Rome," she murmured sweetly. "One more disappearance will not raise suspicion. Mountain roads are dangerous. Bandits are common." Rodrigo looked up from his black notebook, its pages filled with symbols and diagrams that seemed to writhe and shift if stared at too long. "No," he said firmly. "It's too late for that. If Benedetti vanishes now, after investigating our cathedral, Rome will send a full inquiry, perhaps inquisitors themselves. We cannot risk it." From the shadows, young Esperanza stepped forward. Her transformation was the most disturbing of all. The once angelic girl now radiated an unnatural beauty. Her skin shimmered with a pearly sheen. Her smile revealed teeth grown slightly sharper, and her eyes glowed with a light that was anything but human. "There is another way," she whispered. Her voice had a hypnotic quality that made them all turn toward her. "The cathedral ritual isn't complete. We need one final sacrifice, powerful enough to seal what we have awakened forever. A man of God, a papal investigator. His blood will carry a special strength." Don Hernando stared at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You mean?" "I mean we make his investigation part of our ritual," she said, smiling terribly. "We make his discovery the final component that completes our work. His death won't just be murder, it will be consecration." While the Villacruz family plotted their most atrocious act, Brother Benedetti worked feverishly in his room at the inn. By candlelight, he wrote with desperate urgency, as if aware that time was running out. "The evidence is undeniable," he scrawled. "The bones found in the foundations show signs of ritual death. The carvings suggest occult practices blending pre-Christian traditions, perhaps Aztec or Mayan, with elements of European black magic. The Villacruz are not building a cathedral for God, but a vessel for something far more sinister." A soft knock on his door interrupted him. "Brother Benedetti," came a gentle voice. "It is I, Esperanza Villacruz. Might I speak with you? I have important information about your investigation." Benedetti froze, his instincts screaming caution. Yet her words carried urgency, and if she truly held proof, it might be the key to exposing the family. "One moment, señorita," he answered, hastily hiding his notes in a leather pouch beneath his cot. He opened the door just a crack, blocking the view into his room. Esperanza stood in the corridor, wrapped in a white cloak that made her seem like an apparition in the candlelit darkness. Her face wore an expression of anguish that looked heartbreakingly real. "Brother," she whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "I cannot speak here. My family must not know I've come. Please, you must come with me to the cathedral. I can show you something there. Proof of everything you suspect." "The cathedral? At this hour?" Benedetti asked, suspicion tightening his chest. "It is the only time we can go unseen," she pressed. "What my family has done is worse than you imagine, far worse. But I have documents, objects, evidence that will prove their crimes. You must come." Benedetti hesitated. Every instinct warned him against it. And yet, if she spoke the truth, if evidence truly existed. "Very well," he decided at last. "But we go together, and this remains secret until I can examine what you show me." 20 minutes later, two hooded figures crossed the silent village square, heading toward the half-built cathedral. The fog was so heavy they could barely see a few feet ahead. Their footsteps echoed unervingly in the stillness. Esperanza produced a key from her cloak. "My family has complete access," she explained, unlocking a side door to the unfinished temple. Inside, the cathedral was a labyrinth of scaffolding, stone blocks, and abandoned tools. Half-built columns loomed like giant skeletons in the dark. The echo of their steps seemed to awaken spirits in the shadows. "This way," she whispered, guiding him toward the altar. "Beneath it lies a secret chamber. That is where my father keeps proof of everything he has done." But when they reached the center of the altar, Esperanza stopped abruptly. She turned to Benedetti with a smile that was no longer angelic. "You know, brother," she said, her voice stripped of all innocence. "You are right to suspect my family. But you are wrong about one very important thing." "What thing?" Benedetti asked, his hand instinctively clutching the crucifix at his chest. "You think I am a victim of my family's crimes," she replied, and her eyes lit up with an unearthly glow. "When in truth, I am their architect." At that very moment, the torches placed strategically around the altar flared to life, igniting all at once as if by invisible hands. The sudden light revealed a sight that made Brother Benedetti stumble back in horror. The altar wasn't just a block of stone. It was built directly over a deep pit. And the walls of that pit were entirely covered with human bones arranged in complex geometric patterns. Skulls, femurs, ribs. Every type of bone formed symbols that pulsed with a reddish glow, as though alive. And they weren't just bones. Scattered among them were personal belongings, the tools of missing workers, the jewelry of women who had never returned home, crucifixes defiled in ways that would make angels weep. "Welcome," said a voice behind him, "to the true heart of our cathedral." Benedetti spun around to find Don Hernando, Dona Esperanza, and Rodrigo stepping out of the shadows. No longer did they wear masks of Christian respectability. Their faces now showed a cruel satisfaction that made them look like demons disguised as humans. "For years," Don Hernando said, advancing slowly, "we have been feeding what dwells in this place. With every sacrifice, every soul we've offered, our power has grown. And our cathedral, our beautiful cathedral, is merely the vessel to house a force that will make this land our personal kingdom." "What would have you awakened?" Benedetti managed to whisper, though terror shook his voice. "Something that slept in these mountains long before the Spanish conquerors came," Dona Esperanza replied, her voice echoing as though it rose from the earth itself. "The Aztec priests knew it, venerated it. When the Christians arrived, they sealed it here, waiting for the right moment to release it. And we are that moment," Rodrigo added. The black notebook in his hands began to glow with the same red light that pulsed from the pit. "Every death, every sacrifice, every drop of blood spilled in building this cathedral has been a step toward its complete awakening." In that instant, Benedetti understood the full scope of the horror before him. This wasn't simply a family of murderers posing as devout Christians. It was far worse. They had been deliberately feeding an ancient entity, using the cathedral's construction as cover for rituals rooted in long-dead civilizations. And you, brother, Esperanza said with her terrible smile, will be the final sacrifice. Your blood, the blood of a papal investigator, will complete the ritual. By dawn, our creature will awaken fully, and this cathedral will become its temple. Benedetti recoiled, but too late. He realized he was surrounded. The Villacruz family had positioned themselves to block every possible exit. In the flickering torchlight, their faces bore no trace of humanity, only a ravenous hunger hidden for decades beneath masks of piety. You do not understand what you're doing, Benedetti said, forcing his training in exorcisms and demonology to take control of his fear. The forces you're summoning cannot be controlled. They will destroy everything, including you. Don Hernando let out a laugh that echoed through the unfinished vaults like the bark of a beast. Control, brother? We don't seek to control our creature. We serve it, and in return, it grants us power, wealth, and life far beyond human limits. Look closely at us, Dona Esperanza added, stepping forward. Her feet made no sound on the stone floor. Do you really think we are the same people who began this cathedral 40 years ago? My husband was 60 then. I was 40. Our children, barely teenagers. Benedetti stared more closely and felt the blood in his veins freeze. They were right. Hernando looked no older than when construction had begun decades earlier. All four bore an unnatural youth, now revealed in the crimson glow from the pit for what it truly was. How long have you been doing this? He whispered. Since 1645, Rodrigo answered proudly. When my great-grandfather discovered the creature during a mining excavation, our family has fed it for generations. Each generation is rewarded. Eternal life, limitless power, and the honor of serving something far superior to the lesser gods of the Christians. Esperanza the younger stepped closer. Her eyes had changed completely. Her pupils vertical like a serpent's, her irises gleaming gold like molten metal. Do you know the most beautiful part of this, brother? She whispered in his ear with a voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell. Your investigation, your report, your death, all of it will be recorded by the church as a tragic accident. A devout investigator who perished while documenting a miracle. Your blood will consecrate our work, and your death will legitimize it before Rome. At that moment, Brother Benedetti made a decision that would change the course of the entire nightmare. Instead of retreating further, he lunged forward, straight toward the pit of bones. The move was so sudden, so unexpected, that the Villacruz family froze in shock. Benedetti had calculated that if he was destined to die, at least he would make his death useless to their plans. But as his feet touched the edge of the pit, something extraordinary happened. The crucifix around his neck, an ancient relic blessed by the Pope himself, containing a fragment of the true cross, suddenly blazed with a white, pure light that cut through the darkness like a divine sword. The bones lining the pit began to crack and crumble. From deep below came a roar, deafening and otherworldly, shaking the very ground. No, Don Hernando screamed, and for the first time in decades, true terror filled his voice. The creature, it suffers. The roar intensified, and the unfinished cathedral itself began to tremble. Stones split, scaffolding collapsed, and an invisible force seemed to tear reality apart around the altar. But Benedetti pressed on. From his robe, he drew a vial of holy water, consecrated at the very tomb of St. Peter, and poured it over the bones surrounding the pit. The effect was immediate. A blinding eruption of white light burst from the abyss, followed by a scream so hideous it was neither human nor animal, something utterly alien to this world. The bones disintegrated instantly into dust, swept away by a supernatural wind that surged from nowhere. The Villacruz began to change. The unnatural youth they had preserved for decades drained from them in violent, visible waves. Don Hernando aged 40 years and seconds, his hair whitening, his skin shriveling like ancient parchment. Dona Esperanza withered into a bent old crone, her beauty collapsing into grotesque decrepitude. Rodrigo and young Esperanza suffered transformations even more horrifying. Their skin split and peeled away, revealing forms that were no longer human. Rodrigo roared in agony, his body twisting unnaturally, while Esperanza emitted hissing sounds like a nest of giant serpents. "Damn you!" Don Hernando shrieked at Benedetti, though his voice was now that of a dying old man. "You've destroyed everything, generations of work, decades of sacrifice." "No," Benedetti replied, his voice steady with supernatural calm as his crucifix glowed ever brighter. "I have freed the souls of all you murdered, and sent your demon back to the hell it came from." The roar from the pit weakened, faded into a wail, and finally dissolved into absolute silence. The once blazing chasm was now nothing more than an empty hole in the stone. One by one, the Villacruz collapsed. Don Hernando crumbled first, his body disintegrating into ash. Dona Esperanza followed, her last words a curse in a tongue older than Latin. Rodrigo and the young Esperanza resisted longer, but their inhuman forms eventually fell apart as well, dissolving into dust, leaving behind only echoes of screams that no longer belonged to this world. When dawn came to San Miguel de los Remedios, Brother Benedetti was the sole survivor among the ruins of what had been the Cathedral of San Miguel. The entire structure had collapsed overnight, as though the earth itself had swallowed it. In the days that followed the destruction of the cathedral, confusion and mourning spread through the village of San Miguel de los Remedios. At dawn, the villagers found Brother Benedetti unconscious among the rubble, still alive, clutching his crucifix, which had returned to its normal, simple form. He awoke 3 days later, weak but determined to speak. To the people, he told a cautious version of events. He explained that an earthquake had struck during the night, collapsing the cathedral and killing the Villacruz family. The land, he said, was geologically unstable, unsafe for such a massive structure. His official report to Rome was even more discreet. He described the tragedy as a natural collapse during a storm, recording the Villacruz deaths as a misfortune of fate. He recommended the site be abandoned permanently and consecrated as a cemetery for the victims. But in his personal notes, hidden away in the Vatican's secret archives for centuries, Benedetti wrote the full truth. He documented every detail, the ritual sacrifices, the awakening of an ancient entity, and how the cathedral had been nothing but a facade to feed a demonic presence. Life in San Miguel gradually recovered. The silver mines that had belonged to the Villacruz were redistributed among local families. Wealth that had once been concentrated in one cursed dynasty spread across the community, bringing genuine prosperity for the first time in decades. But stranger changes followed. Workers who had survived the cathedral project reported vivid dreams of their lost companions. In these dreams, the missing men appeared at peace, thanking someone unseen for freeing them from the darkness beneath the stones. The families of the vanished experienced signs as well. Maria, the cook, appeared in her sister's dreams to reveal where she had hidden her savings. Diego, the stable boy, came to his son in the night to guide him to important documents. One by one, the souls of the victims found ways to deliver final messages to their loved ones before passing on to eternal rest. Father Castañeda, haunted by guilt for failing to recognize the Villacruz's true nature, underwent a profound transformation. His sermons grew more powerful, his counsel wiser, and he seemed almost supernaturally attuned to detecting evil in his community. It is as if, he later confided to a fellow priest, the souls of the innocents who died left me a fragment of their wisdom. I can no longer be deceived by masks of piety hiding wicked hearts. As for the site of the fallen cathedral, it became a place of spiritual power, but in a way completely opposite to what the Villacruz had intended. Instead of harboring demonic energy, the ground bloomed into a natural sanctuary. Flowers grew with unusually vivid colors. Birds sang melodies that soothed the soul. People traveled there seeking peace in times of anguish. Brother Benedetti remained in San Miguel for 6 more months, helping the villagers heal and ensuring no trace of the demonic influence remained. When he finally left to continue his work elsewhere, he left behind a community transformed, one that had faced absolute evil and survived. His notes, preserved in secrecy, became a manual the church would use for centuries to identify and combat cases of demonic possession and occult rituals. The Villacruz report became required reading for papal investigators. The methods Benedetti used to banish the ancient entity were incorporated into official exorcism protocols. Decades later, when Brother Benedetti was an old and respected man in Rome, he received a letter that moved him deeply. It came from a young priest assigned to San Miguel de los Remedios. The priest wrote that the village had flourished extraordinarily since Benedetti's visit. In all those years, there had not been a single case of violent death or mysterious disappearance. The site of the ruined cathedral had become a place of pilgrimage for those seeking spiritual healing. It is as if, the priest wrote, something sacred has grown from the ashes of something profane. The locals say that on very quiet nights, soft voices can be heard singing hymns of gratitude. We do not know if they are the spirits of the victims or angels rejoicing in their liberation, but the sound brings a peace that transcends human understanding. The story of the Villacruz family became a whispered legend within ecclesiastical circles, a warning about the dangers of ambition disguised as devotion, and a reminder that true faith always finds a way to triumph over darkness. Though the names of Pedro Morales, Maria the cook, Diego the stable boy, and all the other victims of the Villacruz were never written in official history books, their souls finally found the rest they deserved. Their unwilling sacrifice became the seed of a blessing, one that would protect future generations from falling prey to similar evils. In the Vatican archives, sealed with marks requiring papal authority to be opened, the file of the Villacruz family remains. It stands as testimony that the most dangerous evil is that which wears the mask of good, but it also bears witness to something greater, that no darkness can withstand the true light of faith and heroic sacrifice. This mystery reminds us that even the most sacred traditions can be corrupted by greed and the thirst for power, but also that truth will always find its way into the light. Backhand index pointing right, what do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale and want more chilling stories like it, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves mysteries. See you in the next one.